Welcome everyone, this is Jennifer McGuire, so glad you're here. Now for today's crafty episode, a longer video, I really didn't have a theme. Normally in my videos I have a technique that I'm trying to teach or demonstrate. Today I was just having fun. A lot of things going on in our household right now, and I needed just a little crafty therapy, so I went into my craft room and made a bunch of holiday cards. I thought I'd go ahead and share those cards with you, even though there really isn't a technique behind all of them. I do try to look at the products creatively and come up with new ways to use them, and I will share even more ideas that you could try too with similar products. So we're just going to make some holiday cards today. Now I'm going to start first by taking a die set and using it in a very unexpected way. This is something that really helps to get my creative juices going. I recommend it. So for this, I'm using the Spellbinders March 2023 Small Die of the Month Club. I really like Spellbinders different clubs because the value is outstanding, but they have a lot of different products that are similar to this. Now, not showing here is there's an outline for that tree, an outline die. You'll see it later, but for some reason I don't have it on camera right now. So I thought I would use these dies to create a non-tree card. So first I'm using my Spellbinders Platinum die cut machine. You could use whatever machine you have. And you want the embossing mat, the flexible mat that comes with the machine. We're going to make an impression with the die. This will help me to get the placement of my die cuts on my background, so stick with me here. This is a piece of cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I'm taking that tree die and placing an angle on the bottom. This does not cut the tree outline, it just cuts all the floral shapes that form the tree shape. You'll see in a moment. So I'm not cutting with that die here, I'm just making an impression because I have that embossing mat in there. So there you can see that that floral tree shape is impressed into my cardstock or debossed. So now I'm going to take the tree and rotate it so that I can fill in that little corner down there. I'm going for a diagonal area on the bottom of my card, not a tree shape, just looking to use this die creatively. So I'll run that through. Now when I make this impression, the last one will get flattened a bit, but that's okay. I'm only using these impressed lines or images to help me figure out the placement of my die cuts. It's just a time saver. All right, now I want to do the same thing on the top half of the card. So I'll put this back onto that flexible mat there and move my die up to the top at an angle. Now, as I do my cards today, I'm going to talk about other products you may have on your stash that you could try the same kind of ideas. In this case, a background die would be great. Just do this impression kind of at an angle, and then you will have that texture there. Especially if it's a background that cuts a bunch of little shapes like flowers or circles or something, you'll know where to place your die cuts later. So I'll explain that a bit more in a moment. And by the way, this flexible mat used to be brown with the Spellbinders. It's gray now with their newer machines. So now we have that flat diagonal area in the center where we can put our sentiment, and then we'll fill in the die cuts around it. I'm really excited about this because I found a fun way to do a bright white sentiment that's nice and crisp. You could definitely do white heat embossing, but I find this technique to be really easy and gives great results. To do this, I'm using the BetterPress system. Now, this is the new Spellbinders July 2023 BetterPress of the Month Club. So if you sign up for it, you get a plate delivered every month at a great price, and you can cancel anytime. This happens to be July's version. Now, this is the Spellbinders BetterPress system. I have done a very complete video on how to use it. I will link to that video up here on the top right and in my description below. It's just another great tool for your craft room, but you definitely could instead heat emboss a sentiment here. I'm holding the sentiment where I want it positioned against my background. I will then hold those together and flip it over and place it onto the magnetic gray grid portion of the BetterPress system. And I'll place that cardstock so it fits in that black rectangular line that is for an A2 card. So you can see it fits right in there. I'll just lay it down. Then I can lift up my cardstock and my plate is positioned where I need it. Now I'll take the clear plate that goes on the top of the BetterPress system and I'll flip it over. And on this back side, I am taping my blue cardstock piece that we created into the black guidelines for an A2 card panel. So I just put tape on the edges, and I'm inking up my plate with Altenew Cloud White Pigment ink. You could probably use any white pigment ink here, but I found that this one is really good. I've been really liking it lately, so I thought I'd give it a try. I inked up my BetterPress plate, popped the clear plate on top of the BetterPress system, and there's little magnets there to hold it in place. You then run it through your die cut machine. It presses it together, leaving that ink behind, and it impresses the BetterPress plate into your cardstock. So you have a little indentation, kind of like a faux letterpress, and the white ink is left behind. If you don't do a good job inking or you want it to be brighter white, repeat the process. Very easy. Thankfully, the magnets place that clear plate onto the BetterPress tool just right. So every time, if you repeat this a few times, if you wanted, it'll line up great. And look at that great result. So crisp. And you can use these BetterPress plates with your foil machine. But again, I know a new tool or system isn't for everyone. You could always just stamp a white image here or white heat emboss. I do like to heat set white pigment ink because it does want to smear because it takes a bit of time to dry. So I just heat set it quickly. Next, I can create my inked blue die cuts for the flowers on the background. I have my waffle flower grip mat, which is like a giant clear stamp, and it'll hold your die cuts in place as you ink on them. I have it stuck to my glass work surface and it won't move, which is fantastic. This grip mat grips tight onto anything smooth like glass. So I can just have this on my work surface here, place my die cuts on top, and those die cuts are gripped there. Now it's not super sticky. They will move around a little bit, but they won't really slide well when you're trying to ink them, which is great. You can hold those little die cuts in place as you do a bunch of inking. So what I'll do is take a darker blue ink. This is Altenew Fresh Dye Ink. The color is Ride the Wave, which is a beautiful royal blue. And I'll use a small ink blending tool to apply ink just around the center of each of these die cuts very quickly. So I pick up some of this dark ink on my Altenew mini ink blending brush, and I tap off some of the excess ink into the lid of the ink pad. Then I can go to the die cuts, kind of start in the middle and swirl out a bit, kind of in a spiral motion, and that just puts some darker color at the center. This is a great way to change the color of your die cuts or just to add some faux dimension, and I really think it makes it pop. So I'll do this quickly onto each of these flowers, and you can notice the grip mat holds it in place nicely. Once I'm done, I could just peel the grip mat off of my work surface and tilt it, and all of those little flowers will easily fall off. So if you've used a sticky mat in the past and it's too sticky, this might be a good option for you. But really, whatever system you may have to hold die cuts in place while you do your inking will work great. Okay, so now I'm gluing these on top of a silver die cut. So you can see I already glued one silver die cut down. This silver die cut was created with that Poinsettia tree die that I used to make that impression on our dark blue cardstock. I'm gluing that silver die cut right onto the impression. So the reason I did that impression earlier is so I knew how these die cuts would fit together nice and close. You could eyeball little die cuts, but this was a big time saver. So this is just silver matte cardstock, and I'm gluing it right on top of the impression. Then in the areas where flowers go, I'll glue right on top of the silver. So this will save me quite a bit of time in trying to figure out how to piece these together to fill in nicely. So after I glued my silver die cuts down, I'm using my Spellbinders scissors to trim all the excess off the edge. And I have mentioned I really like these scissors. Please put them on your Christmas wish list. They cut so well, especially when you're trying to line things up on the edge of cardstock like this. Amazing scissors. I have already bought 2 extra pair because I like them so much. Anyway, any scissors would work, but those cut like butter. So now that the edges are all cleaned up, I can glue all my die cuts in place. I'm using my Simon Says Stamp Place and Pierce tool. One end is a piercing tool, and one end has a little sticky ball on the end that allows you to pick up these tiny die cuts and place them wherever you need to on your project. I find that to be a huge time saver with tiny die cuts like these little dots and flowers. I'm using Gina K liquid adhesive. It's in a fine tip bottle, and this I know will hold all of these die cuts in place. After I put all of my die cuts in place, I'll trim off the excess, and then I like to use a paper sander just to smooth the edges. I glued that background onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card, and there is my completed card. I know these colors aren't normal for a holiday card or for poinsettias, but I thought it was a fun change of pace. I do think that is another way to kind of stretch your creativity. Do unexpected color schemes. It really encourages you to try something new and try something bold. And I thought this was a great way to take that tree die set and use it in a non-tree way. All right, now that I've used that in a creative way, let's use it in a tree shape, but this time I'll do a tree-shaped card. Now this is a fun mini card, but you could also turn it into a tag, and I have some other ideas which I'll share. So I have a piece of 8.5 by 5.5 inch cardstock. I'll score that right down the middle at 4 1/4 inches. So now I have an A2 side folding card. Now I'll take the outline die. This comes with that poinsettia tree die set that I just used. And I'm placing that die onto the card so that the left edge of the tree die hangs off the score line of the card. That way, when we run it through our die cut machine, it doesn't cut along the score line, only the other sides. And now we have a folded tree-shaped card. It's fun because when it stands up, it kind of wobbles a little bit. Then I used the poinsettia die and the outline together to cut this tree-shaped piece with those floral openings. This will be a guide on how to place our die cuts on the front of this tree. I also used just the outline of the tree to cut from a piece of Altenew double-sided tape. I love this stuff. I'm placing that right under the front of our tree-shaped card. Then I'll remove the release paper, and that means the entire front of this tree-shaped card is covered with adhesive. I use a bone folder to make sure it's pressed down very well. So let's remove the release paper, then take that die cut up there on the top, and we'll place it right on top of the adhesive. So now the only thing that has adhesive exposed are the shapes of those little flowers. So I die cut all of those shapes from gold cardstock, some matte gold cardstock, and I just pop them into the openings onto the exposed adhesive. So it's kind of like putting a puzzle together. This is a technique that I call die cut inlay. So once all of those are in place, I'll just press it down with my bone folder and we'll get a nice smooth result. Then on top of that, I can glue my colorful die cuts. So I use the additional die cuts to cut from different colors of this kind of peach color and glued those on top. And also put a red star at the top of it. After adding all of those die cuts, it's time for a sentiment, and I decided to foil one. I did the foiling off screen and then die cut it out with the coordinating die. I used the Spellbinders July 2023 Glimmer of the Month Club. You can see what you get in that set over there on the right, glimmer plates and coordinating dies. And I'm adding that right onto the bottom center of my tree. Now I thought it'd be fun to also stamp something on the inside. So here I have my Misty stamping tool, and in it I'm putting that waffle flower grip mat that I used earlier. It has a grid stuck to the back of it, which is really helpful in getting good placement, as you'll see I'll do here. You'll see there's a plus sign at the center of this grid mat. I'll place my sentiment right at that center, but up a little bit. Then I will take my door on my Misty and close it to grab that stamp. When I open it, I can take my tree-shaped card and place it centered over that plus sign. There is a green outline of a vertical A2 card. I'm just kind of centering it on that. I'll press it onto that grip mat, which will just hold it in that place long enough to stamp our sentiment. So now I can stamp my sentiment with black ink right there, and I know it'll be centered. I would like to test things first though. So I'm taking a piece of clear plastic, just some recycling plastic here, or a backing from a stamp set, laying it over my card and then stamping onto that. I can then see if it looks good. If it looks good, I'll take that plastic off, wipe it clean, and then stamp it directly onto my card. I like being able to test things first. So here's a look at the completed card. Now there are a few things you could do for this. You could put a string at the top, and it could be a fun tag to put on a gift or a gift bag. and you can write a message underneath our stamp sentiment on the inside. Or you can leave it as a mini note card and it'll stand up and kind of wobble, which is fun. If you want to make it more tree-like shape, you could add a little tree trunk on the bottom, but I decided to leave it as is. Another option is to glue this on the front of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel, and then it'll be like a little flap on your front of your card that lifts up. A fun, change of pace over a traditional opening card. So the Spellbinders die set that I used made it easy to create this floral shaped tree, but you could also cut your own tree shape and add any floral die cuts into that to create a similar design. Okay, now it's time to change things up and do some stitching on cards. I love to stitch on cards. I feel like it adds to that homemade feel of the cards and also is something that's very therapeutic for me to do. However, I know not everyone likes to stitch on cards, so I'll give you some other ideas along the way. For this card and a few others, I'll use the Spellbinders Stitch Christmas Tree die set. It has this die that cuts the piercing holes for the stitching. Then it also has the outline and then this decorative kind of swirly die. So if you want to skip the stitching, you can leave that die out and just do the swirly line and outline together. Then there are also some dies to add a topper and a base to your tree. Now I'm not going to show the stitching of all of these dies in this video. I will show a bit of stitching a bit later. However, I've done many videos on how to stitch on paper or on cards, and I will link to a good one up here on the top right and in my description below. For this one, I stitched with this silver metallic thread and then put that outline kind of swirly die cut on top. It didn't take long to do and the results are great. So now let's do a background for this. It's hard to see in the video, but I did a foiled background. This is the new Spellbinders Glimmer Holly background. I love it. And there's a coordinating layering stencil set that goes with it that you can buy together or separate. However, I don't have it, so I'm just using this foil plate on its own. I also have Spellbinders Opal foil. You can see it's see-through, but has an opally pearlescent shine to it. Now, I'm going to show you first how I use this wrong. So just stick with me. People say they want to see my mistakes. You're going to see one here. I have that hot foil plate, and I'm using some tape onto a piece of cardstock to create a hinge. I'll flip that plate up and slide my opal foil underneath it. You want the pretty side of the foil to touch the pretty side of your plate. I did not do that. I have my foil upside down here. So when I go to put this on my Glimmer foil machine, put the plates on top, and then let the timer run, and then run it through my die cut machine, I don't foil my cardstock. Instead, I foil my plate. I know many of you have done this, and I've done it a billion times. You'll see here that the foil sticks to my plate, not my cardstock, which was my first sign. So now notice the raised surface of my plate has some iridescent shine to it because of that foil. Don't worry, you can leave that foil on there and you can still use that plate. So this time I'll do it correctly. I have my foil here and I'm going to make sure that the pretty side of the foil touches the pretty side of my plate. With this foil, it's kind of hard to tell, but the outside of the foil roll is the pretty side. So this time I'm doing it correctly, running it through my die cut machine, and look at this subtle background that you get. I used a light cardstock, so it's very subtle, but I have this kind of iridescent opally shine when you tilt it in the light. I wish you could see it in real life. It is beautiful, but on the camera and in photos, it's very subtle. If you don't have a foil machine, another kind of subtle but fun background would be to clear heat emboss on colored cardstock or to use Versamark ink for a stamped image. Now let's talk about the metallic thread that I used for this tree, and I'll use it here for the base of my tree. This is from DMC. This is the silver original version, and I usually do 2-ply of that. However, they've recently come out with a thicker version. Let me show you a comparison. So on the left is the silver, and that is the original version. On the left is like the Grande version, the gold one. It's a bit thicker. I didn't use that thicker one today. I used the thinner one, but I wanted to mention that both are available, and I'll link to them below. Both work great for stitching on cards. I will say that metallic thread is a little trickier to stitch with than regular floss. And the reason for that is it doesn't kind of bend as well, I would say. So if you're new to stitching, I would stick with regular colors first, then you can try the metallic. What I normally do with a metallic thread is put one strand of thread through my needle and then tape both of the ends on the back of my project. That way my needle is secure on that metallic thread and I'm stitching with 2-ply as I stitch. So you'll see my needle won't fall off of this and it's giving me a 2-ply result. It's kind of hard to see here because I'm stitching silver on silver. However, I show all about stitching on cards in that video that I have linked up here on the top right and in my description below. I just wanted to remind you that stitching with a metallic thread is a great way to step up your stitched projects. And as always, I usually tape the beginning and end of my thread with clear Scotch tape. I find that ends up with less bulk than tucking your thread under stitches you've already done or tying a knot. All right, so now I have the base of this tree, and I will also do the same stitching on a silver star for the top. Now remember, with this die set, the stitching dies that create the holes are separate from the outline. So if you prefer to just put your stitching holes into a large piece of cardstock or a background piece of cardstock, you can do that. I made mine as separate elements today. I appreciate that Spellbinders gives you the option. So again, I use silver metallic thread to stitch the tree, the base of the tree, and the star topper. Now that the focal point of our card, that stitched tree, and the background is done, we need a sentiment. It's hard to see the sentiment strip there on the bottom of my card in this video. However, it is silver foiled. For this sentiment, I did the foiling off screen, just following the normal foiling process. I'll link to a video up here on the top right in my description below if you want to learn more about that. I used the Spellbinders Everyday Sentiments 2 foil plate set, which comes with this wide sentiment strip die. I really wanted it to fit tighter around my sentiment. So here's a trick that I do. I line it up so the top of that sentiment strip die lines up with close to the top of my sentiment. Then I run that through my die cut machine. Then I take that same die and shift it up a bit so it's close to the bottom of my sentiment. Tape that in place and run it through my die cut machine. Then I end up with a sentiment strip that better fits my sentiment closely and is not as wide. So you could also use your trimmer to cut this closely, but this way I have a nice thinking of you sentiment strip that's foiled silver to match our card. And I just use my trimmer to cut the ends off. Now here is my completed card. I trimmed my background down and added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card. I added the sentiment strip underneath the tree, and I added some silver gemstones to that silver stitching on the tree. There you can see all the detail we have. Believe it or not, the stitching on this is very easy to do and doesn't take long, thanks to little impression lines that the Spellbinders die makes to show you where you should add your stitching. Again, check out that video if you want to learn more. Here you can see that subtle opal background that we used with that hot foil plate and the opal foil. It's a great way to add a little bit of interest to a background. It really does shine nicely in real life. Now I wanted to mention, if you do not like stitching, you could skip the stitching holes on this tree and just use the outline of the tree and that kind of swirly die cut on top. And if you don't like to foil, you can skip the foil background and instead clear heat emboss a stamped image or just leave it plain. But I will say there's something special about this card because it's a very soft color palette and you just have the subtle shine of the background, the sentiment, and that silver thread. Here's another that I created with that same tree die set. This time I used stitching on the background too, and this is one of my favorite new dies from Spellbinder. It does a simple stitch background, but you could skip the stitching if you want. It's called the Spellbinder Starry Argyle die. You can see it does piercing and embossed lines, but also some holes if you do want to stitch. Again, I'm not going to show the stitching here because it's very simple. You can check out one of my stitching videos, which I'll link below. but I cut it from white cardstock and then I stitched it with a very, very light blue floss and also a silver metallic thread. I'm gluing that onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card, and you can see that fun pattern that we get. I will definitely be using this background die in future videos. Now for the tree itself, I used a dark teal cardstock and I stitched with a specialty floss from DMC that changes color as it goes. It goes from like a light blue to a medium blue to a dark blue and then back to light. So you get that variation in the stitching. I then added that swirly layered die cut on top of it, a silver star and some silver gems. Instead of adding the base of the tree, I used a Season's Greeting white heat embossed sentiment strip below it. And this one was probably my favorite of all of the cards. I like how the floss changes colors as I stitch, but really didn't take that long to do. I will link below to those specialty kind of flosses. There are many different color options out there. You could do a green if you want a more traditional tree color. And check out the background, white cardstock with a super light blue floss, and then that silver metallic thread. Then you have all the piercing and embossed detail. I have one more stitched tree example to share with you that I did off screen. Now this one I did green cardstock with a green floss, but as I added on those floss stitches, I added a few beads here and there. So you can see those little beads kind of wiggle around a bit. I'll show you how to add beads to stitching in a moment. I use gold 4mm beads for this. I'll link to the ones I use below. But again, I'll show you adding beads to stitching in a moment. Now for the background, I used that holly foil plate that I showed you earlier with the opal foil, but this time on white cardstock, I used a gold matte foil. So this really gives a more traditional holiday color scheme and was really fun to add that stitching. And that joy die cut, I'll show you where that is from a little bit later in this video. Sorry this jumps around a bit, but this was really just me creating, just having some fun and deciding to share it with you along the way. Before we move on, there's one idea I had for these trees that I didn't have time to do, and that is to create 2 trees, glue them together back to back with a string loop coming out the top. Then you can add it to the front of your card, and it's a removable ornament that the person can keep as a keepsake. I've done a video showing how to incorporate a paper ornament like that onto a card, and I'll link to that up here on the top right and in my description below. So that's another idea with this die set or even with the tree set I used earlier. All right, so now for another example. This one has some stitching, but you could skip that if you want to. I just really wanted to use a bunch of different products together on one card. I have an embossing folder, die set, foil set, stitching dies, other dies, all together. And this is one of the best ways to make the most of your products, to combine them creatively. Now this does feature the new Spellbinders Stitched Poinsettia and Holly die set. I really like this set because there are solid dies without the stitching holes and then dies with the stitching holes. So you can use them together or separate. And of course you can skip the stitching. So I did use the dies and did some basic stitching on these with gold metallic thread. I only did one ply of the gold thread, so it's very thin lined, and I think it really allows more of that color, that red color, to show through. I used 2 shades of red cardstock and 2 shades of green cardstock just for a little variation. Now for the background, I'm using this beautiful classic looking embossing folder from Spellbinders. It's the Holly and Foliage 3D embossing folders. This has a lot of dimension to it. I misted my white cardstock with water first just to get a better impression, and look how gorgeous that is. This embossing folder would be great for a lot of fun techniques, but I'm keeping it simple and using it just on a white background. Now for the other elements on this card, I use the Spellbinders Christmas Bird Poinsettia die set. So this has a little bird that you can layer together, but I'm just using the one that's kind of like a sprig, and I'll do that from gold cardstock. And for a sentiment, I'm using the Spellbinders Merry Christmas die set. This has beautiful detailed Merry and Christmas words and the shadow die. I'm only using the Merry this time, so you can use those words together or separate. Okay, I also use the Spellbinders Glitter Wishes hot foil plates. Lots of holiday foil plate sentiments in here with that sentiment strip die. I just foiled with gold the word Christmas to go with that die cut word Merry. So I used a lot of products here. You definitely don't need to do that. But if you have products in your stash, by using them together, you get more life out of them. So here I have that gold sprig. I cut that from gold cardstock, and I just kind of tear it to make it a little bit shorter, and then I tuck it here and there behind some of my flowers. I do have my flowers and leaves glued onto the background, and that Mary is just sitting there. I won't glue that down until I'm happy with all the placement of everything else. So I have the Mary there that was cut from white cardstock for the shadow, gold cardstock for the word Mary, and look how beautiful that is. For the Christmas, I used that foil plate set that I showed you with gold foil, and I added that on top of the word Mary. So this is one of those cards that has a lot going on, but you definitely could do one flower with one leaf and a simple sentiment if you'd rather have a simple look. And by the way, this is what those flower dies look like if you use regular colored floss to stitch them instead of gold metallic. You definitely could use that flower for all year round. But what I plan to do is to make another holiday card using the blue flowers. I really feel like changing up your colors on your holiday cards helps to keep your creativity going. Okay, for my last batch of cards, I'm using the same die set, but each in a very different way, so I get different looks. Now, this is a really fun die set from Spellbinders. It's the July 2023 Stitching Die of the Month. Now, you get the different dies that you see here, and you could skip the stitching for sure with this. That background die does a faux piercing that is beautiful. Now for that snowflake, it's pretty dainty. It has these little areas sticking out. So before I stitch it, I'm going to cut it twice from cardstock and glue it together. That way it's a bit stronger when I do my stitching. You don't have to do this, but I do feel it makes this stitching process easier. You don't have to worry about any of those bits folding as you do your stitching. So here I just did 2 scraps of blue cardstock, glued it together, and then I'll stitch on top of it. And here is a closer look at what you can create with that die set. Look at that beautiful background and the details on the snowflake. Okay, my first example is pretty simple. Let's start with the background on it. I used an embossing folder for this. There are 2 Spellbinders embossing folders that are similar, and I thought I'd show you the 2. On the left is the July 2023 3D embossing folder of the month. And on the right is the Vintage Ornaments 3D embossing folder. I decided to use the Vintage Ornaments one. Both give kind of a similar look, and I thought it'd be good to do a little comparison. So I misted my cardstock with a bit of water, run it through my die cut machine to give that impression, and look at that beautiful detail. I am crazy about 3D embossing folders. If you've never tried one, I encourage you to do so. Price point on embossing folders is pretty good, and there are so many techniques you can do with them. I've done many videos. I encourage you to check them out. But here I just used blue cardstock, and I'll add that background onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. The next element I need is a sentiment. I used the Spellbinders More Sentiments foil plate set. There are a lot of different sentiment hot foil plate sets at Spellbinders. I encourage you to look at them and pick and choose what has the most sentiments that you might reach for. I used the From Me to You with blue foil for this one on white cardstock. Now for the stitch snowflake, I'm not going to show the stitching of that once again. I will show stitching on a different snowflake in a moment. But with this, I just did basic stitching with blue floss and added gemstones at each of the little points on the snowflake. So this was stitched on a silver metallic cardstock, which really helps to add to the sparkle of this. So although it looks very complicated, it really didn't take much. After the stitching, all you have to do is add the gemstones and you have your card put together. And by the way, this snowflake would also make a great ornament. Just to create 2 snowflakes, glue them together back to back with a loop of thread sticking out of the top, and you can add that temporarily onto a card. Remember, I have a video about that I'll have linked below. But I think the snowflake would be great for that. All right, now for another example using the snowflake. This time I had an idea in my head of layering 2 together. I don't really love the results, but I thought I'd share it anyways. Now the background is using the Puff Dotty 3D embossing folder, which I've used many times in videos. And I cut it down to be 5 1/4 by 5 1/4. And I am gluing onto that one stitched snowflake. And then on top of that, I'll glue another stitched snowflake, but turned. So we have this gigantic snowflake. It's okay. I don't love it, but I thought I'd go ahead and finish it off by adding some little sequins so it has an iridescent shine on the tips. And I added a joy sentiment along with the die cut circle. And that is all on a 5.5 by 5.5 inch note card. And I have a square envelope for it to go in. So I encourage you, if you're not liking how a card's going, just finish it off. It may not be your favorite card in the end, but I'm sure it will still make someone smile. All right, let's do my favorite of the snowflake cards. This one is where I did stitching and added beads onto the stitches. And this time I'll demonstrate it to you. This is a great way to step up your stitching. So I have a doubled up snowflake there, and I am using a needle threader to get the 6-ply DMC floss through the opening or the eye of my needle. There are a few different needle threaders out there. I'm finding this one to be really helpful, and I'll link to it below. So I have my floss on my needle, and I have my snowflake die cut there. Again, that's doubled up. I also have these 4mm beads that I stole from Lila. So these are her school colors. That's why she has those colors. I'm just using a clear one, and again, I'll link to those below. So I'm taking the end of my floss and taping it on the back of the snowflake at the center, and then I will start my stitching. As I do this, please know there are 1,000,001 ways to do this type of stitching. This is just what works for me. I went up one hole, and then I will slide on 2 of the clear beads. Now, the needle that I used is a little bit thinner because I need to get through the holes of these beads. Some of the beads, the holes are too small for the needle, so I just skip that one and go to another bead. Most of them will work. So now that I have 2 beads on there, I will go back down the previous hole and look at, I have 2 beads stitched on there. Then I can go to those little points on the snowflake and just do a regular stitch. You could add beads for this, but I decided to only put beads down the center line there. Now, a lot of people do stitching and add seed beads, which are smaller. You would need a smaller needle and use, only 1 or 2 ply of the floss, so it'd be thinner. I find the seed beads kind of harder to use. These bigger beads are a little bit easier, but you could really use whatever you may have. So I skipped ahead a bit here, and now it's time to add 2 more beads. So I've come up through one of the holes on that center part of this, I don't know what you call these, that stick out the edge of a snowflake. I'm sure there's a word for it. I don't know what it is. But I have put 2 beads on, so you can see those are on my floss there. Now I'll go back down to the other side, and you can see how those beads are lined up. If you don't want to fuss with adding beads, you could always just glue little gemstones on there. So I will continue to stitch on this snowflake and finish it off screen. But for now, I wanted to show you a completed one that I have done. This is the same thing, same beads, same method, but I used different color of cardstock and floss. Now on this one, I have used the background, and if you look closely on the background, you've got that piercing pattern. That's with that die that comes with the snowflake die. And you can see my beads here, the blue stitching, and then I added a foiled sentiment across the center. So if you are into stitching on cards like I am, Spellbinders has a ton of stitching die sets, and this is a great one. And this is just one way you can step that up and get more from your products, adding those little beaded details. Now, if you remember before I showed you this card with little gold beads on it, I did the same method where I just added a bead to a stitch, but this time I only put 1 bead so that little bead can move back and forth, which is really fun. So on the snowflake, I put 2 so it was tighter. On this one, I just did 1 so it could move a bit. Just different options and different ways to really have fun with your supplies. Before we go, I wanted to show you a few more things that I plan to use off screen as part of this little craft session. This is the Spellbinders Christmas Sweater die set. This is a very basic stitching die set. So you can make a little ornament that says ho 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 in the center, and you don't have to put it on the sweater. You could just use those elements on a card without the sweater. This has very basic stitching, so it'd be very quick or is good for beginners. And again, you can use the stitching dies on a big panel, or you can cut that area out using the coordinating outline dies that come with it. That snowflake would be fun to use on a background. There were also 3 layering stencil sets that I was really hoping to use today, but I ran out of time, so I hope to use them too and hope to share them in a video. So these are layering stencil sets that really create a 1-layer card very easily. And these stencils line up easily because of those little tick marks in the corner. You just line those up each time. Now, I have done a video with similar layering stencils from Spellbinders. I will link to that up here in the top right and in my description below. I know a lot of you really like those stencils, so I thought I'd show you these. I'm really excited about them. There are coordinating dies to cut out parts of the background that you create, and those are sold separately or together. I just really like when a good product comes out like this that does the work for you, so I wanted to show it. But I ran out of time for today's video. This video is definitely long enough, and I am off to go play Uno with Lila. If you are interested in the supplies that I used, you can check out the links below in my YouTube description. I'll also link to the videos that I mentioned there. And at the end, I will link to a couple other very related videos that may also be helpful. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon.